It's been 3 years since the goal. We look back at the sliding door moment and finish off our defense pair grades.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the nation's #1 sports podcasting network, and it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Joining me on today's edition of the show is Nich Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday. You could follow him on X at Prudentia0. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $550 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Today, we are going to finish off our grades for the bottom pair defense for the Panthers in the 2025-26 season, along with some of the other pieces that we're filling in from time to time this season. But yesterday, on Thursday, April 30th, was 3 years to the day that the goal happened at TD Garden in Game 7 of Round 1 for the greatest upset in Stanley Cup postseason history. Also, yesterday was a year since the Florida Panthers defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning for a second consecutive year, defeating them by a final score of 6-3 to advance to Round 2 last year. So, Nick, I look back at this, and the Cup wins are great. The appearances in the final are great, but man, the one thing that just launched all of it, of this potential dynasty for the Florida Panthers, doesn't happen without that goal for Carter Verhaeghe. And I mean, still, you talk about the Sam Reinhart goal in Game 7 against the Oilers. I mean, I still don't put that ahead of what Carter Verhaeghe did. I know if you guys want to comment below on whether that is actually bigger than Verhaeghe's, you can, but I just look back at just the confidence that the team had, and the fact that they barely squeaked in, and the fact that how much momentum shifted after that for the Panthers. None of it happens without that goal, and just want to give you the floor on just looking back at that 3 years from the day.
It was a organizational and franchise changing goal, to say the least. I think that the Panthers scared the Boston Bruins, being the last team in. They were probably their worst matchup, if you look at it statistically and style of play. But it all came together by forechecking, winning a couple of puck battles behind the net, and Carter just getting into that low slot and basically ripping a perfect shot. I remember where I was, and I'll ask you the same. But I had actually a beer league game that night, and we were about to take a face-off, and there's a bar above the rink, and you just hear everybody cheering, and some guy just yelled out that, hey, the Panthers did it, they won. And we did a bunch of stick taps for, I guess, like a few minutes and everything. Just the overall joy of what this meant, and little did we know what was going to happen after that for the next couple of years. But I will ask you, where were you?
I was in this exact apartment that I'm in, just in the living room, and I just remember running back and forth, just so excited about the upset. And I remember, because that video was actually on Live Barn for you during that, and then you shared it with us. It's like, hey, if you look closer, this is where I'm at for my beer league game. Like, and then I remember sharing it. It was like, hey, our fellow Fairbanks Friday guest host Nich Fairbanks was in the middle of this while the Panthers scored that overtime winner. And I remember it was a Sunday night for the Panthers there. And then going into the week, and then just 2 days later, they had to travel from Boston to Toronto. I remember their mentality was packed for a week. because they were going to be on the road for that long, and so they did and carried that momentum, winning the first 2 games on the road in Toronto after that. And it's crazy because you look at even them winning Game 7 in Toronto in 2025, they didn't go home immediately because they had to go right to Carolina for Game 1 this time last year. So the fact that, rest versus rust, I mean, both times that the Florida Panthers have done it in the last few years, they've shown that they've shown that when you're playing, it actually favors the team, because you're still like riding high, and then the adrenaline is still going from one game to the next. But I just think about just more of the sliding door moments. I mean, obviously the Brad Marchand save from Game 5, just that a week before that victory. And I just think about what happens with the Panthers going into the very next year. Although they did lose in the Stanley Cup final against Vegas, but then maybe you don't see Dmitry Kulikov come back in 24. Maybe it doesn't convince someone like Oliver Ekman-Larsson to sign with a team that's still very hungry with this group. And then obviously they had to do some changes around the fourth line and for the Panthers here, bring in Kevin Stenlund. I mean, you look at the fact that Ryan Lomberg was also on an expiring deal. They had not brought AJ Greer in just yet, and the fact that this front office was able to identify guys who had familiarity with guys in different places that they've either been a coach or GM. I mean, Paul Maurice with Nate Schmidt, Bill Zito with Kevin Stenlund as well. So the fact that guys have been able to come together, even though some guys had not won championships before, and also guys who have used their clauses to get to the Florida Panthers as well, in Vladimir Tarasenko for that first cup run, and the fact that the Panthers did not have to go on a big spending spree with their asset pool to get someone like Tarasenko, who really showed out in that Eastern Conference final towards the end against the Rangers.
Yeah, and to further the idea of the sliding door moment, imagine all the players that saw that first round and saw the upset and decided that Florida was now a destination. You have Tkachuk, who forced his way to Florida. Thankful that Zito made the trade that he did. But the fact that they were able to make waves and do what they did, it just opened the eyes of some players. And some teams have been trying to emulate what the Panthers have done since. Has anybody been successful? Well, I guess we're going to see.
We'll see.
So, yeah, I was going to say we'll see, just because I don't think I've seen a team do it yet.
Yeah, and they, of course, there'll be a new champion this year with the fact that there's been a lot of the old guard that has been eliminated, because we're going to get a conference final at least this year where 3 out of the 4 teams that were in it last year are not going to be making it this year. Still TBD on the Carolina Hurricanes, as they will actually play Game 1 on Saturday. I woke up to this morning saying, because of the fact that all the Game 6s ended on Thursday, I was just thinking, man, there's not going to be hockey. Yes, there will be hockey actually on Saturday night. Thank goodness we're not going to not have a day with hockey. We are actually going to get our fix. But I just think other things about just the fact that it doesn't happen as well. Although they were tight against the cap going into 2025, LTIR, the rules that were then, helped get Seth Jones here. It helped get Brad Marchand here on a reduced salary as well. And the fact that the cap was going up, it helped them re-sign the guys as well. If Sam Bennett does not go on that 15-goal run and 10 of them coming in the postseason, do you think he's still possibly a Florida Panther? I would argue that there would be a chance that he is not if this doesn't happen, because you're thinking if that goal doesn't happen by Carter Verhaeghe and the 2 championships don't happen, you're thinking, man, there's something that we got to fix. And obviously there's a chance for the front office to overthink things, that if that didn't work as far as that group of centers, maybe Anton Lundell would have been the second line center for the Panthers now and coming into this season. Maybe they would have made the playoffs this year because they wouldn't have so many miles and the risk of injury when you're playing more games. But you look at the fact is the group is still together, and that I'm thankful for.
So I'll leave it with this. the fact that you brought up the, if, certain players didn't do certain things, maybe they weren't here because the Panthers have to think about, making some changes so that they can eventually get to the top again. I think if we're using the sliding door analogy, in Florida, you're going to have the glass slider, right? And then you're going to have the screen slider, right? So I think when Zito decided not to make any moves during the trade deadline of that first season with Tkachuk, that's when the glass door opened.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as Verhaeghe, and then after Game 7, after Verhaeghe scored, that's when the screen door opened, and then it was just everything opened, anything was possible, and the team was going to do anything that they needed to win, whether it was play through injury, go through what they needed to go through, cap wise, bring other players in. I think that it probably stemmed exactly from the belief from this management team.
Yeah, easier to go through a screen door versus a glass, and the fact that the glass was open and it was a lot easier to get through. The fact that they just had to get in, and anything was possible then for this group as they got it done, and then got it done two times in the actual final round to bring a lifetime of memories to fans here in South Florida. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to continue our grades for the defense for the Panthers. We are going to finish out the bottom pair, and then we're also going to discuss the depth of the group. We'll discuss that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the NBA playoffs are here, and every moment matters. If you're looking to get closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You could check stats, trends, and matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience a lot more informed. Whether you're looking at player props or just following the stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. It's very easy app to navigate. It makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Segment 2 here on this Friday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Armando Velez, once again with Nich Fairbanks on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And before we get to the grades for the bottom pair that mostly played this year, I want to go back a little bit of something that I touched on just for a few seconds towards the end of segment number 1, is that life comes at you fast. I mentioned that 3 out of the 4 teams who were in the conference finals last year are at least not going to make it. Still TBD on that Philadelphia-Carolina series, but still questions around what's going to happen with McDavid. I know he's still a year from signing another extension. Jason Robertson for the Dallas Stars is going to be an RFA. But then I look at this. Jim Nill, you can have your Jim Gregory awards, but you're out in round 1 while Bill Zito has his cups. And I saw that. I saw a tweet of that online, and I wanted to bring that to the podcast. Just get just your thoughts on that, Nick.
Give him another one. I mean, he obviously deserves getting his team back in the playoffs and then not making it to the Cup final. Listen, if the award is given to the guy who's going to make the most moves or does the most to improve his team, it's honestly been arguable and debatable for the last couple of years. But as Zito said, he'd rather have cups than the Jim Gregory Award. So Jim Nill actually, I think, has a lot more work ahead of him this summer and what he's got to decide to do. Because for whatever reason, Dallas, to me, they quit. They did not look like themselves the last couple of games.
Yeah, they just couldn't score at even strength. And Jason Robertson actually showed up in this series, especially him and Wyatt Johnson. But they were just power play beneficiaries throughout that series. And it's funny because one of their trades for Tyler Myers at 50% retained, he was a scratch in that game 6 last night. And former Panther Alexander Petrovic who's still playing in 2026, was in that game. Hey, he's a game 4 hero from 2016. So I'll always be thankful, at least for that moment, for Petrovic. But yeah, not a good move there for that group, and lots of questions more than answers there. And Edmonton's goaltending situation just looks worse because they made a lateral move and they added term to it with the move for Tristan Jarry, which he only played in one game throughout that first round against the Anaheim Ducks. But speaking of defensemen and conditions, there's still one thing TBD on a trade that the Panthers made during the deadline, because Jeff Petrie was in the lineup last night for the Minnesota Wild. With that trade, which was a conditional 7th, if Jeff Petrie plays 50% of the games and they make the Western Conference Final, that conditional 7th becomes a 5th. I still believe that it's going to be a really hard hill to climb for the Wild as they face the Avalanche, but something to look at, as he hasn't played the 50% yet. Jonas Brodin is day-to-day, so we'll see if Jeff Petrie gets into the lineup more into the second round and hopefully beyond, so that it improves. But let's go to the grades for the defense pairs for the Florida Panthers, and let's go to the final one, which was mostly Balinskis and Jeff Petrie. So Balinskis, he was obviously had to take on a bigger role for this year, played on average a minute and 30 more than the previous year. His last game of this season actually came shortly after the trade deadline, and then he was shut down for the rest of the year. He did skate the day after the very last game, and he's still TBD on his status for the World Championships, which comes later this month, actually 2 weeks from today in Switzerland. But there's still a little bit of a lack of trust defensively, because his defensive zone starts are at 38%. Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad are around the high 50s, low 60s percentage, to give you guys an idea of what the Panthers do as far as whenever there's a face-off in their own end. But taking on more power play time, just 20 seconds more there, but not too much of a difference in the short-handed time on ice for him. But the same mistake still occurred for Uvis, which was, if he was ahead of the play and the defenseman was nailing a stretch from in the neutral zone from one end to the other near the blue lines, the puck wouldn't stay on his stick, and then the opposition would take a few strides, either dump it, or the Panthers would have to reset. And even if it's not Uvis that's gaining the zone, it wouldn't give the Panthers a lot of that zone time necessary, as you're judged by how you exit there as well. As far as Jeff Petrie, as far as that, 38 years old, we saw him with 8 points in his 58 games. He was just 2 games short of that other bonus, which $150K is owed on bonuses for next year's cap. But even when the injuries occurred, he was not placed on power play too. We saw Gustav Forsling take that position for power play 2, which we hope doesn't happen next year. But we saw that the lack of foot speed at age 38, and the fact is that he was 4 minutes under average time on ice from even the year previous, and even with all these injuries, he wasn't given that level of trust more, which you would have expected. And I got the vision for putting all 3 pairs as far as right-handed shots there, as far as on the right side, but just didn't work out for this group for the most part here. And thankfully the Panthers did right by him by trading him to Minnesota and giving him a chance to win a cup in maybe his last year in the NHL. Yeah,
and to give my grades out, I'll start with Petrie. I'll give him a C, depending, debating on, what, he brought early in the season rather than what he brought later in the season, because he didn't really play. He played 58 games, but there's a lot of times where you didn't notice him, and that's probably a good thing. But the things that you did notice was, yes, his foot speed was not his best asset. He did turn the puck over a couple of times in the defensive zone. And when you're paired with another defenseman who's supposed to be mobile, one of you got to stay home. And I felt like Uvis tried to be the guy who would actually be able to step up and take pinches. You're not the guy to make pinches. You need to play more of a conservative defensive effort, even though you have a better skating ability than your partner. So to me, I think Petrie tried to solidify him, but I just don't think it was a great pairing between them two. So I'll give Petrie a C. And then Uvis, I think everybody knows this. I'm not really high on him, and I'm actually really surprised that they gave him a 2-year deal. But I think that's more or less for security reasons for the back end, just in case something does happen. I think he's a viable 7 or 8, but I am going to give him a D. There's too many things in his game right now that I think that just don't mesh well with what the Panthers' identity is. He's not overly physical. I see him get beat, behind the net a lot. And when it's just with him and another forward going at it, like let's say it's a one-on-one, more often than not, he's going to get beat. Like they'll be able to muscle him off. So that's something that I think the Panthers need to take a look at and make sure that they have people that can actually effectively play, defense and also knock a guy off the puck once in a while.
Yeah, and I actually have him flipped for my grades. I have Petrie as a D, while I have Balinskis as a C minus. And I see it mostly that whenever the puck does get to the half wall, I just have a few visions of whenever it's on the near side and then Balinskis is going towards it. Just a simple hip check that we saw would bounce him off, and then if the forward is a right-handed shot, I've seen so many times that the guy would just flip it out just to get the Panthers to tag up again, or if they are a left-handed shot and they're going, it's just a quick chip, and also Balinskis isn't able to at least get his shoulder towards the glass in order to deflect it, and also get a tap back to the forwards who are actually closer to the corner. Or able to rim it around. But I do think that his instincts are he's aware at times whenever he does gain the zone and also the shoot-ins, and he does recognize when the F1s are going to get there. But whenever the puck does rim back, that's just been the issue for Uvis Balinskis during his time. Honestly, I don't think it's a guarantee that he's even on the team next year, because they're gonna go in the direction of trying to still build towards the inside outward. Obviously, there's a lot of forwards that are signed. 6 out of the 7 D are signed, but are you going to continue this revolving door around the 7D, or are you going to find an actual solidify a position for that, and then Uvis can be a complementary piece? There's still the question on if Mike Benning is going to be part of that, but he's still very young and just made his debut just this year. But the fact that it's cheap, it's going to be easily movable if they need to. But that part affected the ability for Bobrovsky and Tarasov to make saves and also stop breakaway opportunities, which we saw so many times. And we've seen, if there's a breakaway, I usually anticipate that the puck is going to go in.
No, and I agree with you on that, especially this season for whatever reason. I feel like Bob reverted back to his first years, and I've said that over the course of this season, that you're going to beat him 5-hole. He wasn't able to close it quick enough. With Tarasov, you're going to go blocker side. I think that they were testing him even the preseason. They knew that was his opportunity. But again, to me, it's knowing when to pinch and when not to pinch. And the fact that there were so many odd man rushes or there were so many breakaways tells me that the decision-making in that front this year was not the best. I'm not going to 100% blame Uvis for this, because you would see Mikola, when he was healthy, do it, or he would be one of the first defensemen rushing towards the goal, expecting a pass. Seth Jones, I don't think really got caught up. He was actually pretty good at getting back and making sure the play was getting broken up, which I think probably is one of his best assets. But as you say, going forward, I think Florida actually, during this last couple of weeks of the season, were able to see what they have in their, rookie decor, per se, that's down in Charlotte. It'll be interesting to see what camp brings, because I'm pretty high, or at least I'm very interested in 2 particular players to hopefully make a run at the roster.
And we'll discuss more of that coming up in the 3rd segment of the show. Stay right here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And there's nothing like a playoff hockey game live. The intensity, the rivalries, and the crowd just different when you're in the building. Playoffs are some of the best moments in sports, and being there in person is something every fan should experience. Game Time makes it incredibly easy to find tickets, even those in high demand playoff games. In just a few taps, and with the Game Time guarantee, you're getting 100% authentic tickets delivered on time with the best prices. I was browsing the Game Time app and checked out some of these amazing playoff matchups, and there are some incredible seats available, even for games that you'd think be impossible to get into. The app is super easy to use, and you can get tickets fast, and the pricing is all in. So what you see is what you pay. No surprise fees. And the zone deals are awesome. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seat, and you save money. Plus the lowest price guarantee and ticket coverage. I felt confident every time I bought. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On to get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and you redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Third and final segment here on this Friday, May 1st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day, rounding out the defense for the Florida Panthers. Obviously, we didn't mention Dmitry Kulikov in that previous segment. He's usually on the third pair, but injuries really riddled his season, especially after game 2 of the season where he was going for the check in the neutral zone, injured his shoulder, and was out until March 1st, which March 1st was probably one of the worst games of the season, where the Panthers lost to the Islanders in the final minute on that coast-to-coast play by Anders Lee. But the Panthers really missed Dmitry Kulikov's physicality in a season like this. And you just think of the fact that how Dmitry Kulikov has been able to really get those matchups to his favor there, and also work those quick shifts along with the fourth line to get the opportunities for the top pair and the top line for the Panthers. Those were steady pairs throughout the year. But even when Dmitry Kulikov was back, I mean, there's nothing like game speed, obviously. Not breaking any news here, but even when he was back for the Panthers, I did not feel a sense of comfort there because of the fact that he wasn't getting the games under him. And just thinking, when you're out for that long, it's really hard to get readjusted. And the fact that he had the broken nose and then the broken finger in that crazy week that he only missed one game in that stretch, hopefully, because the broken finger doesn't last the whole offseason, he'll be ready to go for the start of training camp. And the fact is, we hope that he is plays a lot more games than we saw last year. And Donovan Sebrango, 8 points in his in the games that he played. Obviously, sometimes sitting in the press box and then coming back in, exceeded what the games played that he did the year before. Only is true rookie season, and saw a lot of growth. Got his first pair of points in that road game in Vegas, but we saw how he's not going to be a career minor leaguer. But at the same time, we did see for Sebrango that he's likely not going to be on a third pair for a championship contending team. So this was a truly resume building type of year for Sebrango. So I think it was actually a success. There were a lot of times where he made some head scratching plays, but a year of growth for him. And also, I don't think he's going to be on the team next year, but I'm going to miss the support of mom on the internet from Kim of every time of go Donnie every time he would get back on the ice. So shout out to Kim Sebrango there. So your thoughts on the two?
Yeah, she was especially loud when the Panthers went up to Ottawa to play. So I wonder why that is. But no, Donovan, I think, was put into a situation where he had to play, and this is much of everybody this season that got brought in. They had to play over what they could possibly handle, or what they were probably originally expected of. Mm-hmm. Did he make his share of mistakes? Yes. Did he take a lot of penalties? Yes. But he was also one of the guys that actually would defend Bob or anybody in front of the net, or make sure that if there was a run taken at somebody, he was on the ice to take care of it, which shows a great, will of character there. So,
Yes.
although he may not be on the team next year, just because of how deep Florida's expecting to be and hopefully healthy, I think he might find a good fit on a team that's still trying to figure it out, trying to fill out their depth. I could see him possibly going out west. I think that game probably plays a little better to his style.
Yeah, and as far as grades for this season for both of them, I do give Kulikov a C plus, and I also give Donovan Zabrango a C. But at the same time, I would hope that the grade does improve for him as he gets more games under his belt. And you know what? He learned a little bit of what culture was like for this group, and hopefully he carries it on to what's maybe his next destination for him come next season. But let's go to the rest of the D for the Panthers. Two guys I want to mention, Tobias Bjornfoot and Mike Benning, which crazy to think. In his very first game in his NHL debut, the trust that Paul Maurice had in Mike Benning to put him on the for overtime where the Panthers got the winner there. He even got a point, a secondary assist there. And the fact that he got the first 2 goals in game 82 there, obviously not a defensive defenseman by any stretch, but was really trusted to get those power play minutes on power play too. As you know, the Panthers were playing more of those younger guys in the lineup and honestly looked very confident. Obviously, when you're in the AHL for as long as he was, they're the slow seasoning that it takes for a defenseman to get it right. I mean, we saw the level of comfort that you went from one level to the next. Tobias Bjornfoot's been with the organization now for a few years after they claimed him off of waivers from Vegas. There's something about the Panthers waiver claims in Vegas. I mean, Tobias Bjornfoot, Cole Reinhardt, Cole Schwint. There's something about the Panthers wanting to purge their roster. But even before that 2-goal game against Chicago for Tobias Bjornfoot, which you were in the building for, his game was actually looking very, very comfortable there. Right before then, he was making a lot of great plays as far as keeping the puck in the zone. But there's only so many years that you could be with an organization before you're actually truly given a chance. So I do believe that because there's been so much time for Toby, I do believe that he himself, as much as it's great to be in South Florida, I believe he would probably opt to go somewhere else, just as much as the Panthers maybe say, okay, maybe it's time to turn the page here. But I did see a better overall performance for Toby this time around versus last year.
So I'll start with Mike. He had a great first game. He didn't look out of place. He looked like he knew exactly where he needed to be, and he was effective. There was a few games where he probably wished he had better ones.
Mm-hmm.
He played better defensively, didn't give up the puck so much or win some battles. But I think this is going to be the biggest summer in his career.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to put on weight. He's got to working on his skating's okay, but I think he's got to work on his body mass and make sure that he can actually be a dependable boards guy. He's got to be able to win some battles and everything. Offensively, I don't have any issues with him. I'm actually surprised he only had 2 goals because there were so many times where it either went off the post or he just missed. So if he does make the team, I do put him at 5 or 6 goals next year minimum. But again, this is his summer of his career to make the NHL, in my opinion. So we'll see what he does to get there. And then Toby. I seem to remember that Vegas picked up Denisenko. And then right after we picked up Toby. And Toby, as Paul Maurice said, has been the ultimate pro without being 100% on the NHL roster, but going down, coming back up to fill in and being a steady defenseman. Were there times that, again, all defensemen make mistakes, but he was a steadying force. He started using his body more. He was throwing hits towards the end of the season and everything. So you see a maturity in his game. So as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to look elsewhere to actually get, a better footing of a job. But if that's not the case, I'm not going to say no to bringing him back as being one of the first call-ups. But I would still put Benning in front of him just to see right now how he fits and how he's going to play going into the preseason.
Yeah, and there were times where Mike Benning was just overmatched whenever the Panthers, especially, were on the road, and he would have and those net front battles for him. But that's going to come with maturity in his game and also in his body for what he does in the offseason, getting into the weight room there. There's only so much you can do about your size. So Toby, I would give him a C+, and Benning, I would give him a B- there. And 17 minutes for Benning, average time on ice at just 24 years old. Unfortunately, they're not going to continue their run in the Calder Cup as they were eliminated in overtime in Game 3 against the Springfield Thunderbirds. But hopefully this time off will be beneficial for them. But 3 other guys, they have incomplete grades. Mikko Svorka, Ludvig Janssen, and Merrick Alscher played 4 games each, especially down the stretch. Svorka came up for 1 game before the Olympic break and was sent back down due to the fact that the Panthers were just limping into that. But Alscher and Svorka, one's a left-handed shot, one's a right-handed shot. Those guys remind me so much of Nico Mikkola on just their fact to skate for their size. Ludvig Janssen has a lot of speed, just like Mike Benning as well. So very excited for those guys coming in, as those guys are still going to be in the organization. Waivers exempt for them. So we'll see. I don't think they'll make the camp the roster out of training camp, but they'll definitely get their shot going forward then. But Nick, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Number one, I apologize for not grading anybody after Kulikov, but I think everybody kind of gets the sentiment. But the other defenseman I'm looking forward to next season, just to see what happens and where his development goes, is Alscher. I thought he looked really good. In the 4 games that he did play, he didn't look out of place. And, he's a big body, and I think he impressed a lot of people. I do think that him and Benning, I could see it going one of 2 ways. Benning, he's got to get on the Gustav Forsling diet and training. And then I think Alscher just needs to more or less solidify his game. And, maybe he could be a 6th defenseman here in the next year or 2. So, again, Florida's got some young people that could be coming up, and it'll be cheap, and that allows them to spend more money in other areas. So, this could be just good news going forward. But other than that, great show today. Loved the topics and everything. And we have 4 days. 4 days until Revenge of the Sith, if you know what I mean.
Yep, and he's talking about the draft lottery, which the beginning of next week will be all dedicated to the draft lottery. So you can follow Nick on X at Prudential0. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. And thank you guys, as always, for listening to the show. And I can't wait for this time next week to get your opinions on where the Panthers land in the draft lottery. Even though your appearance will come days after, you'll have a lot of time to think before you put your thoughts on the air come next week. So, Nick, thank you so much, as always, for joining, and see you next week, my friend.
I'll see you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Sir Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.